we on here? I'm going to call to order the July 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission being held at the Don B. Griffin Room at Harwich Town Hall. This is a hybrid meeting. Participation in person or online is possible. To get login instructions, you can go to the Town of Harwich website and get the instructions from the agenda posted there. So we're going to start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is a request for change in plan for 26 Old Campground Road, map 30, parcel C6, C7, C8, and C9, SE 32-2443, for revisions including a patio around the pool area and connections to the rear deck and side door, a front walkway, a generator, a propane tank, and a pool heater.
I'm gonna recuse myself.
I have an update for you.
Okay.
So we do not have a voting quorum under the bylaw for this hearing, and without the addition of another, at least one member, we will not. So as this is just a minor change in plan, my recommendation to you is that you will let me work with John O'Reilly, the engineer and the owner, to come up with a minimal plan to mitigate for the additional about 300 square feet of patio that is proposed to be in the vicinity of the allowed work within the 50 to 100 foot buffer zone of the wetland. So the mitigation would be just over 600 square feet. I know we're not having an open discussion tonight, but he did provide me just recently a plan that shows a couple of mitigation planting areas within the limit of work that would be planted mainly with sweet pepper bush, which is what grows really, really well out there. That's the predominant shrub community out there, and would enhance the buffer in those areas. We already do have a living fence required along the limit of work line on that property to be a no disturb zone. Seeing as how it's so small and I don't know when we're gonna have a voting quorum for him, I'm looking for your okay to allow me to do this administratively with the applicant, as it is a small change.
Just to clarify, this is an informal okay. Since we don't have a quorum, we can't vote to
Right, you're not voting on anything.
agree,
Are you,
that you can do it administratively even.
I'm agreeable.
are you agreeable?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. I'll get Wayne in a minute.
Okay.
Okay. All set, Wayne.
So the second item on the agenda is a notice of intent from Harwich Conservation Trust, Hinckley's Pond, Herring River Headwaters, Jenkins Bog, map 81, parcels G1, G2-1, G2-2, G2-3, G2-4-1, and Warner Bog, map 90, parcel B2, for ecological restoration. This is a continuance from the June 20 meeting.
Mr. Chair, in light of the fact that we also don't have a voting quorum for this one, and it is a large hearing, they've asked for a continuance to July 17th in hopes that the Conservation Commission can gain another member shortly. If anybody's interested in being on the Conservation Commission, we have openings. It pays nothing.
Right, it's only 40 hours a week, too. So no, that's not true.
You cannot vote on your own ones, no. All right, so July, they would, for now, they would like a continuation to July 17th and see what happens.
Okay, anyone care to make a motion?
I will move for continuance for July 17th.
Seconded?
He can't.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nothing for me.
Okay,
Okay, so next is a notice of intent for 11 Riverbend Road, map 1, parcel G1-9 for the replacement of an existing wooden bulkhead, the installation of floats with scallop growing nets. I was corrected earlier.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Somebody told
you gotta
me.
live here, you call them scallops, not scallops.
Yeah, that's unacceptable.
Good. I'm glad we got that behind us. Scallop throwing nets. I lived here all my life. I don't know what the problem is. And dredging at the base of the bulkhead to allow for scallop growing nets to remain submerged at low tide. Salt marsh restoration is also proposed in eroded areas. This is a continuance from June 20. So do we have,
Mr. Crispin?
I am here,
okay.
and in the room the Lang should be in the room with you, I believe,
They are.
although I don't see the audience.
They're here.
I do have about an 8-slide PowerPoint that I would love to share with you guys. Can I share my screen without?
We'll let you, hold on.
Yeah.
And Jeff and Sandra, if you were planning on talking and you'd like to sit up here, you may.
All right, what am I looking at here? Microsoft tab, do I need to tab something?
At the bottom of the screen.
Entire screen?
Share.
Entire screen, there we go,
Mr. Lang,
I think.
please just identify yourself for the record.
I'm Jeffrey Lang, we're at 99 Riverside Drive in West Harwich.
Thank you.
There should be a share icon at the bottom of the screen.
All right, is anybody seeing this PowerPoint yet?
Nope.
No, just see you.
Okay, just see smiling me.
David.
Difficulty with your video conference. Okay, let's try this again. Share screen. Why is it not letting me?
Dave, if you can
you
email
love
it, Dave, if you can email it to me, I will,
Well, if we can do that, hang on 2 seconds there.
all right, so Matt, I'll email it to you.
Okay.
What am I using for the email for you, please? I'm sure I've got it in here somewhere. What's your email?
Oh, we can see your screen now.
Yeah.
This is my screen.
Oh, you can see the PowerPoint?
No,
No,
So it's, the
No.
email is,
You-
capital P presentation. Laptop.
Laptop, where am I here?
What do you want?
What do you want to go to? You don't want to see my timesheet? Why is this not doing this? Let me just email it to you. It won't take all night.
so Matt was giving you the email address.
It's Amy, right?
If
Howard
you could
Government-
actually send it to where Matt is gonna tell you, that would be easier, because I wouldn't have to forward it. Matt, if you want to.
Yeah,
Are you ready, sir?
I'm waiting for emails here.
Okay.
What's popping up? Or is it on is it on the meeting screen?
He needs the email.
Where would you like me to?
Yeah, Matt, yeah,
You ready? Okay. Capital P presentation.
Time out, time out, time out. We're going here. New mail. Capital P, presentations.
Presentation. laptop 2021
At something?
at outlook.com.
AOL?
At outlook.com.
Oh, all right. Let's not send a little bit of echo in that,
In the future, Dave, if you can send them
Yeah.
presentations to me ahead of the meeting, that would be really helpful, so we could have it queued up for you.
my bad.
No worries, just letting you know you can do that.
See if this comes through right now. Hopefully it does. Seems like every town has a different type of viewing system and it'll drive you nuts. Did that come through?
So could you repeat back the email that I gave you?
Dave, can you please repeat back the email address?
Presentation lot 2021 at outlook.com.
It's a presentation laptop. 2021.
Laptop.
Yeah.
Terrible echo in your little room there. Let's try this again. Presentation laptop 2021 at Outlook. Presentation laptop 2021 at outlook.com. It recognizes it. Okay. Attach, Conscom meeting. Here it comes. No title. Hopefully this goes through.
Takes a little while to read.
Yeah, it's a big file, so.
It's 15. It's not huge, but it's bigger than normal.
That Jeff Lang one, was it? I sent it to you also.
How about this? Did that share?
I beat you, Dave.
You beat me.
Okay, either one will work, sir?
Yeah, they're the same thing.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, my apologies on the confusion on that. So there's about 8 or 9 slides here. If you're ready, because am I seeing your screen? Am I seeing my screen? They all look the same.
We can see it.
All right, yeah, okay, so that first slide is just a locust map. I think you all know where we are on the Herring River. And that little red couple of lines is really the project area. Before we even get started, I understand that the Waterways Committee in town has not met on this, so we kind of don't expect you to close this out and get this done tonight, but we're information, questions, answers, and trying to start this dialogue as we move along. But that's the location. Back in the 30s, there was a cove dug out of the edge of the river, which I will show you in a few minutes for history. And if you go to the next slide, I'll give you a quick overview of what the existing condition looks like. Or can I do that from here? No, you got to do it.
We did, we can see it.
Oh, why am I still seeing one slide? Okay. Are you looking at a picture of
The
Yeah,
bulkhead.
The bulkhead.
the bulkhead? Yeah. So that's, it's very confusing when I'm seeing a different maybe if I stop sharing, there we are. If I stop sharing, that's too many confusions. Just a quick picture of what it looks like today. That wooden bulkhead was built back in the 30s sometime and has seen numerous repairs. As you can see on the left side of that picture, to the back side of it, it's quite eroded behind it, and it's being held together with pieces of old corroded plywood and planking, and it's really tired. That wall's really the only thing keeping the salt marsh from falling into the river. So if we could slide to the next slide. Just give you a quick glimpse, and this slide was really prepared for the waterways people, more so than you, but it shows that the narrowest point in the river is down on the next property. I think it's about 70 feet wide at his point, and we've got a much wider. So if you want the next slide, I zoomed in a little bit so you get a little better picture of that. You can see that the number's a little better. I think it's 100 and something feet wide at where the seawall's getting refixed, and it's only about 70 feet wide down below that. And that adjacent property actually puts a boat out on his dock and float, so it's actually narrower than that. So it's not the narrowest spot on the stream, and I know that's going to be an issue with the shore and harbor people. Next slide will get us through. And just from a little bit of history, this is 1930. This is a land court plan. The red line is where the bulkhead is going and where it is for all intents and purposes. That line on the left one basically is the mean high water line. And if you're not familiar with land court plans, they do not decree anything below the mean high water line. And that's how we know that's the mean high water line. The right line is a Chapter 91 license about the same time of 1930. And what's interesting about this slide is where the red L shape is, it's authorized for dredging. So that tells us that this is not new dredging, it's licensed dredging already. And this is a little bit in conflicting what Fish and Marine people documented just yesterday, I believe. So that's just a little bit of background on the history of this. What happened on this site was the basin was excavated out in about 1930, and they took the basin area and they put it basically on top of where the salt marsh is and leveled it. And that's why the salt marsh is where it is today, is because it's all filled land, including behind the bulkhead. Next slide. This is a very quick graphic of what's out there. The existing houses in the upper left, the basin is where it says site plan, and we are looking at putting the floats in purple. There is a red line to the left of the purple floats, which is where the new bulkhead is going, which is just landward of the existing one, enough not to touch the salt marsh. And the darker green is what's getting filled in behind the bulkhead. Is about 450 feet of salt marsh that's going to be created behind that bulkhead, and the intent is to use the dredge materials which are underneath those purple floats and put it back there. And the reason we want to dredge under the floats is so we have 6 feet of water at mean low water, so we can grow the scallops under there, and I'll show you that in a second. Next slide, please. This is the quick cross-section of what the system looks like. The white vertical lines is the existing pile, bulkhead system. The brown line is the proposed wooden pile that'll help hold the floats in place. The blue line to the left of that is the new sheet pile, which has tiebacks going back into under the salt marsh. Those will be helical piles, so they'll all be driven in from the water side by a barge. And the secret to this is the little red boxes to the far right of the drawing. Jeff describes those as a Chinese lantern-like unit with multiple floors in it. And each one of those floors holds a bunch of scallops. And I believe over the course of a year, they come to a size large enough to be harvested. So this is a pretty productive little thing. And that's the idea. So those floats stay in place. And I'll show you a picture on the next slide, I think. Just a couple of the key elements, how this works through. We remove the existing bulkhead. We replace it with a new steel bulkhead. We do the maintenance dredging to -6 mean low water under the floats. We install the wooden piles and the guardrails, which will hold the floats. Put the floats in place, those are year-round. And just as mitigation, and for clarification, there is no salt marsh alteration. It's designed not to touch the salt marsh. We restore about 450 feet of salt marsh behind the bulkhead. And part of the mitigation is a donation of scallop seedings, which can be placed around the town. And the bottom one, I am having trouble reading, and my memory isn't working with me, because it's right behind this screen here. Can I?
The denitrification?
Oh, the D-Night, thank you. It's just behind your Conservation Commission banner. Yes, one of the benefits of this whole scallop farm is a recognized denitrification benefit to growing all these scallops in this place. So that's kind of the key elements. If we can go to the next slide. This is a photograph of Jeff's, I'll call it a test cell, but he's growing scallops over on his property. And it's a very cute little thing. It looks like a float for a boat float. It's got a hatch in the top, and all of those Chinese lanterns hold down into the hatch there and kind of lock in place. So it's pretty straightforward. On this one, you see the piles on the right with the guide rails that make the float go up and down at high tide and low tide. And the next one, I think, is the last one that's of interest. Yeah, just a questions thing. So that's the project in a nutshell. We're trying to fix an old bulkhead, put in a new one, and enhance it with the scallop industry here. That's about where we're at. Those are just a couple of aerial photographs through the years of the place.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything, Hannah?
Our intention here is to try to replace that seawall before I have to fish it out of the ocean. And as a Chapter 91 license holder, I have two options. One is to, if I'm not going to use it and repair it, then I need to remove it. And so the other option, since it does no longer have access to land, we pulled all of the walkways that the previous owners had across the marsh are gone. Our proposed farming of this would be from the water. And that's really, we're setting the operation up for a boat with a lift on it. Because you can imagine a net that's 7-8 feet long with animals every 6 inches in it, plus biofouling, can get to be a couple hundred pounds by the time you're trying to lift that up and out of the water, to where we believe we have to have the ability to have a boat with a lift to be able to manage these things, especially harvest time in the fall. But by farming that, it makes economic sense for me to replace and rebuild the seawall. And trying to manage the, minimizing any encroachment on the channel, because I'm a boater there. I'm just up the river, and so I go through that section often. That is one of our biggest concerns, where we're trying to, within the allowable discretion of Chapter 91 replacement, it's kind of hard to tell. You see, like in the lines of the original 1930 plan, it was a nice straight line from our neighbor's steel bulkhead. And today, it kind of actually jogs about 6 to 7 feet out into the river, and then the whole thing is kind of leaning out into the river, the whole length of it. So our proposal is to, we think we're going to gain 4 to 5 feet of the 6 feet that we're going to add of the scallop floats by straightening it up, keeping it in line with Dave Kelleher's property bulkhead, so, and kind of putting it along where all of the erosion has happened, so that when we do the cage floats on the outside, we're not significantly encroaching upon the channel. And then being able to have the scallops there allows us to make it a viable project out of replacing it as compared to just us working through and getting it removed. So we've only preliminarily met with neighbors, so I know there are some other concerns that they have about commercial businesses or commercial operations in a residential area. And that was one of our goals, actually, of, unlike oyster farming, we believe the opportunity for scallops is that they like middle water and they like to not be touched. And so it allows an opportunity to have farming going on where it could minimize the not in my backyard syndrome that a lot of oyster farmers are having with having everything up in cages up floating on the surface. And we don't have anywhere near the labor. Scallops don't like to be touched. So once you put them out in July, they really stay there until November when you're going to be pulling them out and harvesting. So that's our plan, and we're looking for input at this point, because we know not only do you not have a quorum, but we still need waterways to be weighing in as probably, I'm not sure who else, probably
We actually
Chapter
do,
91 and
yeah.
EMF and a lot of other people, but this is where we had to start.
Yep. We actually do have a quorum,
Okay.
for your hearing. We didn't for the previous hearing, but for your hearing, there's no conflicts of interest here. But yes, prior to my recommending that the commission take any action on this, it does go to waterways. That is our protocol, to talk about navigation, and also to meet Don Yanuzzi, the natural resource director there. He would also review the project as well. And typically, you would go to them first, and then we would get something in writing from them, detailing their concerns, or if they're okay with it, just essentially their approval. So there, I know the next meeting is July 17th, which happens to be the same as our next meeting. And meaning that the next time to come before us would likely be August 7th. And I know this is a evolving project and it's taken some time, so hopefully a slight delay isn't too big of a problem. But that's unfortunately our schedule as it's seen. So that being said, if you want, I'll go through my review of the project. So we did receive just today, and I provided it to you folks as well, and Dave Crispin got it, from the Division of Marine Fisheries, detailing some of their review and concern on this project. So first, you had mentioned that your hope, and when we had talked in the planning of all this, your plan was to move the bulkhead as landward as you possibly could in the area that's currently deteriorated, so that you're not gonna encroach farther out into the river as much as possible.
And it's also where the 1930
Okay,
Chapter 91
Okay.
shows that original
okay.
one was. You know, so
Farther
it's-
out? Okay.
No, it was further in. It showed
Oh.
that it was in
Okay.
alignment with the steel bulkhead of Dave Keller.
Okay,
So that's kind of not knowing where exactly the original one was
Mm-hmm.
versus where existing is was a question.
so your application states it's gonna be constructed 1 to 3 feet landward of the bulkhead. You're mentioning 4 to 5. I'm just curious, what is the actual number? Can it be shown on the plans that you are moving inland?
I can tell you, if you can hear me, it varies.
Okay,
The closest point that we moved it back to was the edge of the salt marsh that's hanging on, it's a little projection that sticks out into that eroded area.
I see it.
That's the closest point. At the neighbor's end, we tied into his wall because his wall has sand behind it, basically, so we can do that without touching the salt marsh. But the answer to your question is it varies as we pull it back. It's about 3 or 4 feet on average.
Okay.
But we certainly didn't want to chop that chunk of salt marsh off.
No, I understand, and I understand, having, been to the site a couple of times, I understand that it does vary. Okay, so also per the letter, project site lies within map shellfish habitat for quahog and softshell clam, as well as numerous other species. So their comment was when you had that no live shellfish were found by Paul Mancuso in May of this year while raking sediment abutting the existing wooden bulkhead. It says, however, the full footprint of the project area was not surveyed to assess existing standing stock biomass of shellfish and other marine resources. I would anticipate DMF probably wanting that to be done, and that would be,
Yeah, and I can reply to that, too.
okay,
What he did was the immediate area around where we're putting the bulkhead in and where we've got dredging, which is a very small area around that bulkhead. We actually talked to Paul about going further around it, and I was afraid he would sink up to his neck in the mud, so that's another story down the line, but we're not going into that.
okay, as long as
So
the
I think we can, I
project-
think we can respond to their question is the bottom line,
Great,
and we will respond.
I have a question would be, I am in the hatchery business,
right,
and I am growing quahogs, and I am growing oysters.
yep.
And would there ever be an interest in, instead of spending money doing a survey, spend the same money in animals to be released into the area after we've done the dredging and done to where we reseed it with our own, with stock, because our cages are off the bottom. So
Yeah.
once we're done, we're not impacting the bottom, and it would be a better use of funds to restock with seed than to necessarily do a survey when I know part of that is not, most of the guys that are working the river aren't fishing there
Right.
anyhow because of the muck side.
So it's been practice of the Conservation Commission for an area that has not been dredged in quite a while to require a shellfish survey to get an accurate read of what actually is in that area prior to doing any work. So they can let you know that when we go around the table. But, because you had mentioned that this was maintenance dredging. The DMF is seeing this as an improvement dredging project.
Distinction.
Well, when was the last time this area was dredged?
I believe 53.
So it's essentially new dredging. It's essentially new dredging.
I know it was still deep
Yeah.
in the 90s.
Yeah.
When I look back through the
Yep.
Google Earth, you can tell when it started becoming dry at low tide, as compared to still having
Mm-hmm. Right.
a really deep channel.
Yep.
But
Let's not confuse the basin with the
With
area
the-
that we're talking about, though. The
Okay.
area that we're talking about tonight is just the replacement and the floats that have been shown. And the dredging is immediate to that area, of which Paul went out and found no shellfish and the sand and the gravelly material not conducive to shellfish. That was his conclusion.
And I
So
apologize.
we'll deal with fish, but that's the short story. We'll deal with marine fisheries.
Did we receive a copy of that shellfish survey? I apologize if I'm,
I believe it's in the notice.
okay. I will take a look, just to,
Hannah's shaking her head. I think her mic is not working or something.
Can't hear you.
I apologize. It was a while ago that I reviewed this one, so I'm not remembering accurately. Hannah, you can also use the chat. Okay, so we'll look into that, make sure I have it. If I don't, I will let you know. They seem to be a bit concerned of dredging in the intertidal habitat. A portion of your dredge footprint immediately against the wall is technically between mean high and mean low water, so technically it's changing habits or wetland resource area types, which they generally discourage if possible. There's different performance standards for land under the ocean versus intertidal is actually almost considered a coastal beach area, and we can go more into that. They and myself support restoring the salt marsh behind the bulkhead. I do kind of disagree with their comment about their comment of essentially leaving the bulkhead where it is and replacing it where exactly it is. That's what they seem to be getting at, is wanting to be done, and then the area behind it filled. They're saying it would be disruption of salt marsh. To me, it's not level behind there. You can't just do what they're suggesting of replacing the bulkhead exactly where it is and then now planting right behind that bulkhead, because there's a severe gully or whatever behind the wall there.
Correct.
And to me, I don't see the moving of that wall back to the more actual edge of salt marsh, filling in the holes there and replanting as a detriment. That's my review of it, and I'm not sure if DMF, I'm sure they got all the photos that you sent, but it's not just denuded in back of the wall, it's completely scarped out. So in my view, it's almost just coastal beach in and of itself behind there. They had several other recommendations, which you're aware of, and the commission has copies of too, but those are my kind of main, I have the similar questions as they do. I'll defer to Waterways and the Natural Resource Director for their review. But I don't think I have anything further at this time.
Okay, well, let's have comments and questions from commissioners. Wayne?
I don't have a lot of questions. I think this is a great idea. This is something that's new out there, and basically doing scallops. I know people do quahogs and oysters all the time, but my only question, just kind of a curiosity question, do those scallops breed while before they're harvested? Do they release any spat or anything?
No.
They don't?
They don't.
Yeah,
They're a single season.
I guess.
We start them in the winter
Uh-huh.
and get them large enough that when we're putting them out in July, they'll get to essentially mature 5 to 6 inch size in that first season, because we started them earlier.
Now, they're filter feeders, aren't they?
Yep.
So they'll filter out stuff in the water, clean the water up. I think it's a great idea myself.
And
That's just me.
the ones we've analyzed right now, for every 2,000 animals that we grow out, we get 1 kilo of nitrogen out of the water.
How many of those Chinese lanterns are you gonna be involved in this project?
Dave, do you remember what the count was on that layout that, like,
I don't. I'd be making up a number. We can certainly get that to you, and we're going to continue this. We can get you exact number.
yeah, that's-
I'd be interested in knowing, 'cause it's probably substantial.
Just rough numbers. There's three or four baskets in each float, and there's 15 floats or so. So there's somewhere on the order of 40 or 50 baskets in there.
All set?
All I have
Mark?
at this point.
It's a pretty interesting project. I think there's a lot of merit to it. More out of curiosity, I'd love to know what the area would yield in the course of a season.
we would like to too.
Yeah, I bet you would. I mean, I wouldn't even have any guess.
It's fairly low density. So inside each of these nets, They're about a 2-foot diameter, 6-inch high section, you know, but then it's an 8 feet of those little 6-inch sections. But each one of those has like 40 animals in it. Because they have to have enough space that they're not,
Swim.
that they can still swim, they do little gymnastics when they're under there. But it's not a high density like oysters where you can pack them in. So it's not quite the quantities you might think. But
How many layers did you say this would entail?
depends on the water depth, you know, because we have to stay a foot off the bottom.
Yeah.
And you've got 6-inch high trays or sections, and the nets are like typically 8 to 10 feet long. So I think most of that water is at 9 feet. So my guess is 8, you'd have 8. So you'd have 16 layers.
They need to be submerged all the time.
They need to be submerged all the time, which is very different than oysters. So that's why hanging them underneath the floating dock allows you to use the water column underneath it as compared to surface area where oysters like to be in the sun partly every tide.
I don't really have any specific questions, but I am very curious about it. It's quite interesting.
It is.
Sophia?
Sure, I have a couple questions. It sounds like a good thing to replace the bulkhead and preserve the salt marsh. Sounds like the other option is for it to slip into the sea, or the river. I'm a little concerned about the DMF. They're concerned that the new bulkhead would permanently displace the current, will likely result in similar erosion and loss of marsh at the seaward edge, abutting the new bulkhead location over time. So I guess I would like to have somebody address that and see if it does start to wash out behind the new bulkhead, or why, wouldn't it, that's question one. And
I can respond to that now, and we will do that in writing. The reason the marsh is eroding behind the existing bulkhead is that the existing bulkhead is wooden, it's full of holes, the back of it, as I showed in one of those photographs, has plywood that was nailed to it, I don't know how many years ago, but because of the holes, the sand literally just washes out the holes behind the existing bulkhead. The new bulkhead is going to be solid sheet pile, so nothing's going to pass from one side to the other. So for that reason, I think Marine Fisheries has misunderstood how a revetment or a bulkhead works in this case. It's going to be a solid barrier that's not going to let that sand come out from underneath and behind the wall. And we'll put that all in writing and we'll respond to their question, but that's the short answer.
is the only place where it's washing out is through it, it's not sweeping behind it and?
It's all coming out through it. This place is where you can put your leg or your arm through that bulkhead at low tide.
Okay. And my second.
Maybe your body. There's pretty big holes in it.
My second question is, I'm curious about the maintenance dredging. I see it says minor maintenance dredging will be completed as needed. I'm just curious about, so say the project goes forward and in order to do this, you have to dredge and it sort of creates a new, or shifts the habitat a little bit. Is that habitat going to be able to kind of like change with that depth change? So, the vegetation kind of comes back and becomes a nice, healthy new habitat, or is there a risk of that sand building up, and how often might you have to re-dredge under the scallops?
In this condition, I don't think we're going to have to redredge very often in this location. We have about a -5 grade underneath the beds that we're proposing here. The approval from Chapter 91 is -6, so we're only lowering the grade about a foot at one edge, and then it's a little higher up against the bulkhead right now because of accretion. If the sand comes down the river and accretes, we may have to do it again to keep this thing viable, but the idea is to keep 6 feet of water underneath the floats at low tide at all times to keep these animals alive. And that's the only reason we went to 6, was because that's what the Chapter 91 license allowed. We didn't try to push it to 8 or 9 or 10 feet deep.
On the main channel is 8 feet deep there.
Out in the channel,
On the
and
outside
there
of
is,
the existing
we're
bulkhead.
not in the channel, interestingly enough. The Chapter 91 plan shows where the channel is, the land court plans show where the channel is. These floats are not in the channel. The dredging is not in the channel, it's adjacent to it.
All set?
I guess so. I'm still, like, not very often, do we think like a few years between dredging?
I'd like to think it'd be less often than that. And I don't think this channel has been dredged, in my understanding of it, in recent times.
And with, if the bulkhead gets replaced with one that's not so porous,
Yeah.
you won't have that sedimentation coming in either.
It'll be kind of going.
So
Correct.
I would guess, I would guess no more than every 10 years or plus,
Okay.
even more than that.
I
It
do
just
have a
hasn't been done in a long time.
Gotcha. All right, no other questions, so.
One question. The muddy base that's in front of the current bulkhead, how far does that travel at this point, do you know?
Oh, you, trying to think where, you mean where it cuts back to the house, where
Yeah, how big an area does that particular material take up on the floor of the river?
not very much of where we're repairing this seawall. Most of that area is to the north, back into where it originally was dredged out for schooner boathouse. And that part that's filled in is pretty much full of anoxic muck. The probably last 5 or 6 feet after we turn west, the first section's deep, where I have an existing dock permit on the corner. That's deep. But the last section, last 8 to 10 feet there, starts getting up into some of the silty stuff. That's about the only place where that silt area is. The whole front of the whole eastern side of that channel is all deep and gravel. Really, any of the dredging we're doing is kind of because we're moving it back into the area that's been eroded, as compared to the front side of that drops off into almost channel depth.
Do I understand correctly? That material that you dredge is gonna become backfill behind the wall?
The good fill, yeah, that sand, the sand material.
Yeah, not the
Not the
real
muck,
fines,
not the
no.
muck.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
So I have a few questions, just to clarify, you mentioned 8 foot, but you're only asking for 6 feet at low tide, so that's it, right? You're not contemplating deeper dredging, 8 feet of dredging?
Nope. Nope, we work with what we got on and stay off the bottom.
Okay, so can you clarify where the shellfish where the shellfish investigation was? I was understanding from last week that it was seaward from the existing wall, but I'm not sure that's the case. Were there shellfish dug landward of the existing seawall?
Dave, I wasn't there, were you?
I wasn't there either. I do not believe he dug behind the wall.
So that's an.
I'm sure he visually looked at it, and if there were shellfish in there, clams and whatnot, you'd see the spouts, but I don't, we'll have to ask. That's a question we can address to you folks in the next
I
meeting.
think we need a map of where the shellfish was done, because one of the points from DMF is that that sandy area between the existing seawall and the salt marsh, that is landward of the seawall, is an intertidal area where one would expect to find shellfish. And disturbing those shellfish, destroying that habitat by moving the seawall back is going to be an issue that we need to consider. You're taking that all away, right? And that
One way or
is
another.
potentially, that
Either
is
it will
potentially.
become the
Yeah, but
seawall.
we still have to consider that. That's
Yeah.
one of the things we have to take into account during this permitting
Yeah.
process. And the other part of it, which is also a point DMF makes, is in that functionally, you're talking about dredging in the intertidal zone. That is, that area between the existing seawall and the salt marsh is intertidal area, and what you're talking about is removing, I don't know how much, 6 or 8 feet of fill there, which is technically, I believe, dredging. You're gonna pull out the existing seawall, you're gonna remove that, or I don't know what order you're gonna do this in, but effectively, you're pulling out the existing seawall, removing a bunch of fill in the intertidal zone and putting it somewhere else. That's part of the dredging process, and that should be made very explicit in your request for permitting here. And finally, you said you don't expect erosion. Mr. Crispin said this after the new seawall is out because the existing erosion is all happening through holes in the existing crumbling seawall. However, there will be tidal flow behind any new seawall there, right? The salt marsh will be flooded during high tide, and that water has to go somewhere as the tide goes out. And as the tide floods in, the water will be coming in. My question is whether there's a risk of erosion, not because all the sand is filtering through holes in the seawall, but because of tidal flow behind the seawall. And to me, this situation is sort of analogous to situations that happen all over the place. It's happening in a very big way in Chatham right now, where there's an existing seawall, rock revetment with a return, and there's a lot of erosion beyond that, and because of tidal flow and current, there's material being removed from behind the seawall and undermining the whole thing. So I would like to hear a fully considered opinion about that. What is the risk of erosion behind that seawall due to tidal flow? I think that's all I had. And I guess
We can address that, and I think we better do that at a continued meeting, just so I get my facts together.
So in terms of our consideration of what's happening here, you're invoking land court plan from 90 years ago, give or take, and saying the actual permitted seawall is landward by a couple of feet from where it is now. And this is a question for you more than anything else, Amy, is that for us, considering what we're comparing the new seawall to, should we be taking existing conditions or what the Chapter 91 permit said 90 years ago?
Yeah. So back 90 years ago, there wasn't orders of conditions with local conservation, so it was the Chapter 91. However, just because something was built or moved or something, I think we need to take into account current conditions. And almost, this is, in my purview, this is almost like a brand-new project. Other than that, you're grandfathered in a sense to have a seawall in some approximate location, here, we'll say. But the effects what we need to consider are the effects to the resources, meaning land under the ocean, land containing shellfish, coastal beach, which is that intertidal area, and salt marsh. So, no, that doesn't really answer your question.
Maybe there isn't a direct
But,
answer,
yeah, so I mean, they have a permit through Chapter 91, which preceded us, and that is still valid. But they're proposing new work onto it, or to do under that permit. So you are to evaluate the current conditions and what they're proposing.
Sorry, may I?
Yes, please.
Do we take into consideration, like, the alternative, do they have a responsibility to replace or maintain, because the alternative is that there is no seawall, is that right? And,
That would be in their Chapter 91, which I don't have at my fingertips. Usually Chapter 91 say license and maintain. It is the responsibility of the owners to maintain.
remove it.
Or remove, so removing it could, I think maybe that's something, if you're gonna be redoing a narrative, the do-nothing alternative should maybe be further vetted. If you do nothing and this falls in, or you remove it, there could be further impacts to that salt marsh that has been also protected all of these years, as
Whose
well.
responsibility is that?
Right,
If
I know.
my Chapter 91 structure is gone because
Right.
I upheld my responsibility to remove one that wasn't repaired,
right,
then the erosion and the loss of that entire salt marsh,
yeah,
I lose land,
right.
but it's unusable
Protection.
land for me.
Yeah, protection, it offers you some sort of protection. I'm not
You
saying
know,
that,
just
I'm
saying
not,
that
I don't think
That's
that,
the dilemma
Yeah.
on, which is worse.
yeah. I mean, I'm not suggesting that as an option, and, but I think we always look at all the alternatives, and how that they would look.
yeah, it's
Dave,
helpful to
can we
know what's on the
simulate
table.
at all, or do anything with how would that sand wall erode without a seawall whatsoever? Because it would end up eddying back against Dave Kelleher's return
Right.
bids.
Right. Like I said, I'm not suggesting that that's even an option, but we always have to look at everything.
'Cause I know we modeled water flow when we were looking at the basin on where the water, how it goes up into the little marsh and crosses the road and goes into some of the neighbors' yards. You know, and
Yeah, oh, yeah.
that, because we had to do some modeling to see if we end up using this area, what's the tidal direction and where's most of the erosion coming? Where's
Right.
most of the water motion coming from? And it is happening more on
Outgoing.
outgoing tide
Yeah.
is where it gets most of the stirring.
Yep.
Back up inside the area. But I don't know that we really looked at what might happen on the front side with a turn.
Right.
Okay, so,
Have some people in
I
there.
think now is time for public comment. I don't think there's anyone online who, well, I'll invite anyone online. I don't think there is who wants to comment right now.
If there's anybody,
Otherwise, if anyone in the room has something to say, yes, sir, please
You would
step
come
to
up to
the
the mic.
microphone here, identify yourself.
thank you. And
So
just,
thank you for listening. I want to make a few points. My name is Frank
Please
Doyle.
identify yourself first.
I'm going to do that.
Okay.
My name is Frank Doyle. I'm a 40-year resident of Harwich. My family's a 75-year resident of Harwich. I'm kind of a newbie in the neighborhood. Dave, I think you've been there 45 years, and Jenny Funk was before you. I'm here speaking on behalf of 5 abutters tonight and some other neighbors. The other neighbors, Paul Kelly is here, and Paul lives in a home that was taken down and rebuilt, substantial investment. And Howard Curtin, right down the street as well. And so this is a neighborhood that over many, many decades has been substantially improved as a residential neighborhood, completely residential neighborhood. The Langs are a commercial operator, and therein lies the rub. We want to be sure that our neighborhood, of our single-family homes, that they don't get rented out, we live there with our families, remains a residential neighborhood. What the Langs are proposing, and what you heard tonight, is phase one of a multi-phase operation. So the first phase, somebody said it's hard to argue with. We'd have a hard time arguing with it as well. You're going to replace a bulkhead that is falling apart? Okay, we'll figure out how to do the floats or whatever. Phase one. The second two phases include knocking down the house that they purchased. By the way, they don't live there, they don't intend to live there, purely farm, commercial operators. Knock down the house. And then the basin that sits in front, over time, they will dredge that out, put 6 feet or whatever the appropriate amount of space is, and use that as a scallop farm. So today, Mr. Lang told us that he thought this new bulkhead area would produce 400,000 to 600,000 animals per year. You could multiply that by 10x if the basin gets hollowed out. Could be talking $5 million worth of revenue. By anybody's definition, that's a business, a commercial business, very profitable business. And I have great faith that Mr. Lang knows exactly what he's doing and is pretty good at it. He's done it before. But you're talking about putting a commercial operation, $5-6 million revenue business, in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So the conversation we want to have with the commission is the slippery slope one of, okay, so you approve this, phase one, then comes the house, then comes the hollowing out the basin. And we're now in a position where the finances of creating this commercial operation is so substantive that the business starts to overtake the neighborhood in terms of the value of what this business is worth. So the good news is we had our very first meeting tonight with Mr. Lang. I thought it was a successful meeting. We were open and honest with each other. By the way, my neighbors are not, these are all really good people. We try to come to a decision that's good for us. We love the river, we love our neighborhood. We'd like to try to figure out, is there a middle ground? But there is no middle ground on a $6 million commercial business in the middle of our neighborhood. And we need some time to sort this out. We've agreed we'll meet together as a small group and then meet again with Mr. Lang and try to work this out. But I don't want you leaving this room tonight thinking that this is simply rebuilding a seawall at the right price with the homeowner doing it. This is a much more involved, much more complicated, much more intrinsic commercial business that you're going to put right smack dab in the middle of a neighborhood that's operated the way it has for 50, 60 years. And that's what we'd like you to have on your mind as you leave tonight, is then we leave to kind of do our job of trying to figure out with Mr. Lang, is there a middle ground here? And if there's not a middle ground, coming back to you and getting your input and your advice on, okay, what are we going to do about it?
So, sir,
Yes,
you must understand that your considerations, while very valid and clearly there's something concerning to you, they're not within our purview at all.
well, I'm not sure of that.
We are, our remit here is to assess what's being proposed here in the context of state and local wetlands protection statutes.
What do you
So-
think happens to that marsh that you correctly observed has water in and out of every day?
Well, we have to,
Today.
we have to consider what's being proposed in the context of what's gonna happen in the marsh. And if Mr. Lang, in fact, and I believe, I accept what you're saying, at face value that you expect him to be coming back to us and asking to dredge, asking for permission to do a rather substantial dredging project, and we will have to consider that as well and its effect on the surroundings. But whether or not it destroys your neighborhood is not something, I get your concern, and it is a valid concern, it's just not something we can act on. And I appreciate you telling us that, and who knows, but we really have to judge what's being proposed here in the context of the Wetlands Protection Act and related.
And actually, one of the things I had forgotten earlier is that the aquaculture permitting requires Board of Selectmen approval as well.
Correct.
So
A- absolutely, and we understand
the Board of
That's more
Selectmen
appropriate.
are much more responsive to the concerns you're bringing up.
About zoning
It
type
comes-
Yeah,
thing.
and I've talked to the harbor master, and you'll hear from him.
Yep.
So you also heard tonight that the width of the river at that point, I think, was 100 feet. Well, must be at high tide, because there are moored boats right in front of the wall, number one. Number two, in front of that wall, when tide goes out, and the boat's there, I have a boat there, it's hard to get out of there through that narrow neck, and you'll hear that. So all I'm asking for is for you to keep an open mind until we have a chance to do our job, which we'll do as quickly as we possibly can, but it's not gonna happen by the 17th of July, that's too close, but maybe by August 17th, if that's the date that you get back together again. But we'd like to come back with a thoughtful and intelligent point of view to the Conservation Committee that would allow us to be able to present to you why this slippery slope is not a great idea.
Okay, thank you. We will consider what you have to say in more detail when you're here with that. I'd just like to know whether any of the other commissioners have anything to say about,
No remarks.
okay. Amy? Okay.
I have a request. Mr. Crispin, I'm looking at your site plan here, and I think this is something that the harbor master would also be interested in, because I'm not seeing it on the plan. It might be helpful in talking about distances, width of the river, if you could put a width of the river from Mr. Lang's property to the eastern side on the plan. Normally, it's just a line across the river that says how many linear feet it is at its narrowest point closest to your project. That would probably be very helpful.
Yeah, that was one of the slides I showed you tonight that
Yep.
wasn't really for content, it was more for information, but we have that for him, yes.
Perfect. If you could email it to me as well, that would be helpful for our file.
And I would also.
It's in the slide presentation.
Okay.
I also want to just repeat a request I think I made earlier, which is for you to provide a map of where shellfish samples were taken.
Right, I got that as a note.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is there anybody else?
anyone else?
My name's Paul Kelly, and I live at 7 Riverbend Road, which is directly across from Jeff's property. I want to start by saying, first of all, I echo the comments of Frank Doyle. There's 4 or 5 of us that live immediate. We met earlier tonight with Jeff and Sandy, and we appreciate the fact that they've been very open, and, we expressed some concerns. Part of my concern is how many of these floats, these rafts, is he proposing, short-term, long-term, to put in this little harbor there? Because, if it's a limited number, a couple, it's not really probably going to be a problem for the neighbors. If it's a multitude of these rafts, then it effectively changes the whole culture of what is a residential neighborhood. If you walk through this neighborhood, these are longtime owners, myself, Frank, Dave, who's with us here, and there were, earlier when we met, there were a number of us that met on Jeff's back porch to talk about some of these issues. I understand the limited nature of your jurisdiction, But in terms of, putting raft after raft after raft in this harbor, that is going to impact, I'm no expert on the ecology of the area, but that is going to impact the marine life, it's going to impact the tides, it's going to really change the culture of that neighborhood. And I would hope that as you consider this down the road, hopefully after getting some input from the neighbors, when we get a chance to talk amongst ourselves and talk again with Jeff and Sandy, that you keep that in mind, and not simply base it upon some of the more technical data that we've heard tonight during the presentation. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do we have anything further from the commission? So,
Continuance till August.
August 7th is our next
7th.
available
Okay.
for this.
can we have a motion?
I move to continue to August 7th.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
4-0.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody, very much.
Thank you. See you again.
Thank you. Okay. You have a printed copy of the agenda, somebody on my computer just died. Here you go. Thank you. Sure. So next on the agenda, we have a request for a certificate of compliance for 2 Miller's Toll Road, map 111, parcel K3-3, SE 32-2491 for a new modular dwelling.
This was a partial tear down rebuild, and the new piece is modular. We did the site visit, it was pretty straightforward, and it's in substantial compliance with the orders of conditions, so we'd recommend a cert of compliance for 2 Miller's Toll.
I'll move for that.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
While we are on certs of compliance, this is, it's not an agenda item, and we're not asking to reconsider a certificate of compliance. There was a certificate of compliance issued many years ago for a project on 18 Catherine Rose Road. And actually, I think I gave you that one instead. And it just needs a re-signature because the owners never took the old one to the registry. So it's already been voted on. I did another check on the property and found it still to be in compliance, and it's holding up a real estate transaction, so. It just needs a re-signature. You don't need to vote.
That road name sounds familiar.
North side of
Yeah, it
Hinkley
does.
Pond.
Okay, oh, okay, yes.
North side of Hinkley Pond.
Oh.
It just needs a legal re-signature. I mean, wet signatures. Okay.
Okay, so next are 4 orders of conditions. First is for 23 Davis Lane, map 8, parcel N6, to demolish a single-family dwelling and accessory structure and construct a new dwelling, pool, hardscape.
I printed them out for you on your,
Can we do those all together?
This thing says 23 Mill Davis Lane, by the way.
what does? Mine?
The order.
Uh-oh. Did I fix?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, we'll fix that. So that's an easy fix. This should just be Davis Lane. Sorry. I'll just say fixed address. I mean, if anybody, we could do them together, but if anybody had any comments on any of them, we should take them separately.
Can just take a moment to
Yeah.
have a look at the 4 and then.
Yeah, because I didn't get them to you till today, so. Take a minute. That's a good catch. error on my copying and pasting part.
Okay.
So in your copies, I will say, I didn't reprint them because I didn't want to waste any more paper. But I realized for this one and another one that I didn't put an as-built site plan requirement as a condition, so yours don't have that, but I added them to my copies. And
Okay, anybody else need more time?
No?
So we're going to consider all four here, that is
Oh, okay.
23 Davis Lane, map 8, parcel N6, to demolish a single-family dwelling and accessory structure and construct a new dwelling, pool, and hardscape. Theophilus F. Smith Road, map 55, parcel H3-11, for a recharging of water station. 19 Walther Road, map 121/3, parcel 9-4A-0, for reconstruction and improvement of a stone revetment. And 23 Mill Road, map 15, parcel U4-32, to remove an existing house, parking and septic system, construct a new house, parking and septic system, invasive plant management, mitigation plantings. Do we have a motion?
I would move to approve all.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. So, no discussion and possible vote, right?
Yep, and minutes, we found when we looked at them, because they had been started previously, they found that they need a decent amount of work, so I was trying to get 6:20 out to you before tonight, but,
Okay,
I did,
so,
so Lily and I are gonna make a concerted effort to get all three sets of the minutes for our next meeting, and hopefully this one as well, it's a short meeting. So, no minutes tonight. If you know of anybody who wants to be an executive assistant to the building and conservation departments, please have them be in touch with me.
Can't even get somebody to take a paying job, huh?
so I have one comment, which is a week from this coming Saturday. That is July 13th. There's going to be a meeting at the Harwich Community Center of a new organization called the Harwich Pond Coalition. There's a nascent website for the Harwich Pond Coalition at harwichwaters.org. And if you plan on attending this meeting, go to harwichwaters.org and hit the button that says register, just so people
That's
know.
the 13th?
That is a week from Saturday, the 13th. And if you go to the harwichwaters.org, there's a brief statement of purpose there, you can see, but it's basically advocacy for freshwater resources in Harwich.
Very nice, thank you for helping getting that running. Have a happy 4th, everybody.
Yeah, you too.
Same to you.
You too.
Anything further?
Question? The
Yes, sir.
group that you just mentioned, is that established as a town committee, or is it
No.
a private group?
This is a private group
Okay.
organized initially by 3 separate pond groups in town. Hopefully will include anybody who's concerned about such things.
finally have a nice stretch of weather this holiday, don't we? So far.
So far,
Today was such a fat.
Last
I know.
couple of days are beautiful.
But then I was reading-
tomorrow looks good, and then it,
Yeah.
iffy,
Good possible rain tomorrow night, right?
late tomorrow night.
Yesterday morning, it was 60 degrees out there. My
I loved
God.
it,
It was beautiful, crystal clear.
I loved it.
Oh, yeah.
How about this morning? Wasn't it
Yeah,
cold
about
this
the
morning
same as
too?
morning too, yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Friend of mine,
need a motion to
emailed me
adjourn?
from Las Vegas.
Not yet, motion to adjourn?
113 out there.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
They're gonna be
So
the rest of
who
the
wants to be
week.
there? So I will entertain a motion.
So be it.
Second that motion.
Oh, come on, be a little more explicit.
Adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second that move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.